Jack Atlas, the king of turbo dueling. Yusei Fudo's eternal rival, satellite freedom fighter, and wielder of the Burning Soul. A man who, on the surface, appears to be all style and no substance, merely a shadow of Seto Kaiba that had been copy-pasted into a new era to fit a character roster, but is probably the most textually complex character in the entire show. As I've stated before in Yusei Explained, the politics of class and poverty pervade the entire setting of 5Ds, and thus the characters are a reflection of those themes. While Yusei is a stalwart individual who's gruff, but nonetheless always put his community above himself, what if someone was just as skilled, just as talented, but was a little less altruistic? Though to be fair, Jack wasn't always like that. Much like Yusei, his parents were killed in the Zero Reverse incident, and they grew up together in Satellite, and eventually formed a team alongside Crow Hogan and Colin Kessler to take down duel gangs across Satellite. Normally I go with the English translation for names because I feel like it, and while The Enforcers is a pretty sweet name, the original Team Satisfaction has such a wonderfully cheesy ring to it that I've gotta go with it. However, the team was eventually disbanded after everyone felt Colin had gone too far after blowing up part of Sector Security's base, which in my opinion was completely based, and without a team to guide and support him, Jack shifted his worldview. Those you look up to, those you surround yourself with will eventually disappoint you, leave you, hurt you. The only person you can trust to always have your back is you. And so, when given an opportunity to break free of the squalor of Satellite, he threatened the life of a companion, stole Yusei's Duel Runner and Stardust Dragon, and lived a lie as the king of turbo dueling, celebrity of New Domino City. But for all that he gained, the one thing he didn't want was the haunting specter of guilt and shame. Always having to prove that he made the right choice, he ruthlessly defeated duelist after duelist, humiliating them in comeback victories he would orchestrate just to show how control of the duel he was in, how far ahead he was from the competition, that his philosophy of radical self-interest was superior to sitting around and helping others that would inevitably betray you. It was only after his public defeat at the hands of Yusei, after losing everything he'd built up through his immoral actions, and having a hand reached out from someone with really cute glasses, that he was in a state to connect with his older self. A version that knew how important community was, especially while living in the darkest of circumstances. And while he would never fully shed his persona of arrogance and pride, within was a noble soul that could not stand idly by and watch injustice happen. And that's reflected in Jack's monsters of choice. No matter what stage of Jack's development we see, he still wields Fiends and Dark Dragon monsters. Hey, just cause you're a good guy doesn't mean you can't play the edgy cards. However, while Jack is very fond of Resonators and his ace monster, Red Dragon Archfiend, he actually ran a ton of cards outside of them. So we'll be talking about all of those cards first. So strap on those helmets, rev those engines up, and get ready to kick this duel into overdrive. Let's see who rules the duel with Jack Atlas Explained. But before we continue, a quick reminder to please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed my content so far. We're on the road to 100,000 subscribers, and there's no better way to get there than on our duel runners. Our next stop is 40k, which means Leo and Luna Explained, where we'll be covering Ancient Fairy Dragon's companions, the Power Tool Dragons, Morphtronics, and any other cards that are more than meets the eye. We've also got our Discord, where there are a lot of suggestions for videos, and none of them are good. I also have a Twitch where you can join me for viewer duels, progression polls pulls, and chaos draft pulls for the foreseeable future. And don't forget about my Patreon, where you can gain access to my videos early, reach some of these milestones, as well as helping to determine which videos I make. Thank you all so much for watching, and now, back to the video. Part 1. Peace of Mind. I'd like to start things off with probably one of the most iconic of these off-theme monsters, the Peace Golem line. Big Peace Golem is a level 5 Earth Rock monster with 2100 attack and 0 defense, and if your opponent controls a monster and you control no monsters, you can normal summon this card without tributes. This makes a fairly good normal summon under those circumstances, but a Cyber Dragon it is not, especially because if it was a special summon, it'd work way better with its little cousins, Medium and Small Peace Golems. Medium Peace Golem is a level 4 Earth Rock monster with 1600 attack and 0 defense, while Small Piece Golem is a level 3 Earth Rock monster with 1100 attack and 0 defense, and if either of them are summoned, if you control Big Piece Golem, you can special summon the other from your deck, but the summoned monster's effects are negated while face up on the field, so Small Piece can get Medium Piece and vice versa. Now, none of them are tuners, and we're nowhere near Link summoning at this point, so are we just getting material together for, what, tribute summons? No, because as it turns out, long before Yusei shook the boat by fusion summoning in 5Ds, Jack was doing that as early as episode 4 with Multiple Piece Golem. It's a level 7 Earth Rock fusion monster with 2600 attack and 1300 defense, requiring Big Piece and Medium Piece Golem as material. I guess a Small Piece Golem didn't really provide enough articulation. At the end of the battle phase, if this card attacked or was attacked, you can return it to the extra deck, then if all the fusion material monsters that were used for the fusion summon are in the grave, you can special summon them. So you can attack with a big monster, then split them off into 2 smaller ones. There's some level of utility here. You can essentially turn this into 2 tribute material after the battle phase, or to modulate your non-tuner materials. And of course, today it just turns into more Link material. But realistically, that means running a fusion summoning effect, a bunch of piece golems, and multiple piece. I could see this being used if they released some kind of branded fusion card so you could make this for free, but as it is now, they're basically multiple pieces of trash golems. Part 2? Fiends. Okay, we've got the blockheads out of the way, now let's go over some of the general Fiend monsters, all of which are dark. And the best possible place to start is Absolute King Backjack, a level 1 monster with 0 attack and defense, and during your opponent's turn as a quick effect, you can banish this card from your grave to excavate the top card of your deck, and if it's a normal trap, you can set that to the field, otherwise send it to the grave, and that set card can be activated this turn. That might seem like an extreme gamble, but we can help mitigate this with Backjack's second effect. If this card is sent to the grave, you can look at 3 cards from the top of your deck, then place them on top of your deck in any order. So it can be destroyed by battle, milled, sent to the grave as material for a summon. Any way that gets this card in the grave triggers that effect, and thank goodness for it. You can float a normal trap to the top of your deck, then immediately banish this card to get the set, unless it's your turn, in which case you just have to make sure you don't shuffle your deck before you reach your opponent's turn. Alternatively, you could float a card you want to send to the grave to the top, and then use this as a way to mill it at quick effect speed. Backjack's versatility meant that it saw play in several decks, not least of which the trap card heavy variants of Burning Abyss, though some of us were fond of having another excavate engine in Sylvans. Oh, and speaking of engines, its little backpack looks like a little version of Jack's Duel Runner. Seriously, when are we getting the Backjack plushies? Konami is really behind the 8 ball on these. Archfiend Interceptor is a level 4 monster with 1400 attack and 1600 defense, and while you control this face-up attack position card, when an opponent's monster declares an attack, inflict 500 damage to your opponent. Oh my god, I can't believe it, they printed Live Twin Lilla all the way back in 2010! Though I guess the idea of a football VTuber was way ahead of its time, so that's probably why it didn't catch on. But hey, despite the hardships, it's good to see that Interceptor still has a spring in their step. Battle Fader is a level 1 monster with 0 attack and defense, and when an opponent's monster declares a direct attack, you can special summon this card from your hand, then end the battle phase. And when summoned this way, banish it when it leaves the field. If you've played for a while, you'll remember this as a very annoying hand trap, though as time goes on, it's kind of embodied the platonic ideal of a hand trap. It stops a certain action without causing some massive swing in card advantage. You get to keep a monster on board and use it in building your field while preventing a push for damage. It was popular in any deck running Monarchs because this opened up an avenue for a massive reversal, but nowadays with big monster boards having the gates up the wazoo, it's hard to justify using this. Unless of course you're running some kind of stall deck that can infinitely recycle this with Sentence of Doom, but I wouldn't know anything about that! Dark Tinker is a level 2 Dark Tuner monster with 1000 attack and 1300 defense, and when this card you control is sent to the grave, look at the top card of your deck and either return it to the top or bottom of your deck. Ah, gotta love those when effects that are mandatory, always makes me do a double take. It's a shame it has to be sent to the grave while you control it, so no milling triggers here, but it is nice that it gives you the option to either keep it on top of your deck if you want it, or tuck it on the bottom of your deck if it's bad for your current situation, as a way of rewarding you for its use, either as synchro synchro material or as just a blocker. And hey, if you're gonna lift mechanics from other games, Magic's a pretty good one to do it from. We should get more cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! That scry. Gash the Dust Lord is a level 4 monster with 1000 attack and 1200 defense, and when this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, increase the level of this card by 1 up to a maximum of 12. Now, there are a lot of niche scenarios in which this can be helpful. It increases the power of the calculator by a little bit. Its level can be modulated for Synchro and Xyz summons, or you can make it big enough so it's a viable cost for Strike of the Monarchs. But at the end of the day, you're gonna have to reckon with the fact that you're playing a level 4 monster with 1000 attack just to get level modulation. Trust me, Gash here is a localized disaster. Lancer Archfiend is a level 4 monster with 1600 attack and 1400 defense, and once per turn, when your monster declares an attack on an opponent's monster, you can activate this effect to grant that monster piercing battle damage. And that's pretty cool. Even if Lancer can't run over a target, it can ensure a bigger monster can handle it to make an opening for the rest of your team and maintain offensive pressure. Just remember that the bonus lasts for that battle, so no funny business trying to grant piercing to a multi-attacker. I mean, I guess you could try, but I don't think they'd get the point. Mad Archfiend is a level 4 monster with 1800 attack and 0 defense, and if this card attacks a defense position monster, it deals piercing battle damage. And if this face-up attack position monster is targeted for an attack, change it to defense position. That ensures that just about everything is gonna run over this, but that just means you'll have to find a way to deter that. Hitting Mad Archfiend with Forbidden Chalice in response to that trigger is a fun way to catch your opponent off guard, and a blanket card like Skill Drain can counteract that as well. Just don't bring up the fact that their defining characteristic is being mad. They get very defensive about that. Magical King Moonstar is a level 3 dark monster with 900 attack and 600 defense, and can't be used as synchro material, except for the synchro summon of a dark synchro monster. So, you know, that's not really a problem. If you control a tuner monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if this card is normal or special summoned, you can target one other monster you control or is in your grave, and until the end of this turn, this card's level becomes the same as that monster's. Also, you can't special summon for the rest of the turn except by synchro summoning. Now, you only cause that lock if you level modulate, so if you only need a level 3 non-tuner, this card has you covered, no hassle. It's not even a once per turn, so you're not likely to brick on multiple copies. And if you do need to modulate levels as a last resort, well then it's nice that you have the option, though I guess that versatility hasn't kept its widespread usage from waning. Morph King Stygiogel is a level 1 tuner monster with 100 attack and defense, and if this card is normal or special summoned, you can target another monster on the field. You can't special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn except synchro monsters. Also, change this card's level to the level of that target, and if you do, gain life points equal to that target's level times 200. And during your main phase, you can special summon a Fiend monster from your hand with a level lower than this card's. So you have an incentive to target the highest level monster on board to special summon a Fiend from your hand and gain some sweet life points, but you also don't want to mess up the levels and miss out on synchro summoning. This works really well with the Resonators though, since they're all pretty small in level, so it won't take much for Stygiogel to get bigger than them. And since it can target any other face-up monster, you can set things up by fielding a friend first. Now, I know this says it's a Fiend monster, but are we sure it's not a Gradle? I'm getting a lot of Gradle vibes here. Ogre of the Scarlet Shadow is a level 4 monster with 0 attack and defense, and during your opponent's turn, when your opponent declares a second direct attack during the same battle phase, you can special summon this card from your hand. When you do, this card's attack and defense become equal to the attack and defense of the first monster that attacked directly this turn, if it's still face up on the field. And the turn this card is special summoned by this effect, your opponent cannot select monsters other than this card as an attack target, while Ogre of the Scarlet Shadow is face up on the field. So this is like a weird Gores, but it works if you have back row, but if your opponent attacks in Gore's order, Scarlet Shadow isn't going to have the kind of stats needed to surpass the next attacker. So yeah, long story short, I'm gonna pass on this card. It has a wild amount of red flags. Phantom King Hide Ride is a level 3 tuner monster with 1500 attack and 300 defense, and if you use this card for a synchro summon, you can treat it as a non-tuner, which is a pretty slick way to help expand your options when it comes to synchro summoning. There are very few synchro monsters that allow for the usage of multiple tuners for their summon, but Hide Ride here lets you break the rules a little. And honestly, it's just like a king to have such a flagrant disregard for the rules when it's for their benefit. Are you telling me the Phantom Knight serves someone like this? Sinister Sprocket is a level 2 Dark Tuner monster with 400 attack and 0 defense, and if this card is sent to the grave for a synchro summon of a Dark Synchro monster, you can destroy a face-up spell or trap card on the field. So on top of helping you access an extra deck monster, you get some back row removal as well, and anything that can turn off pesky floodgates is fine by me. Though I have to wonder what got this Sprocket so sinister. Remember folks, always take your dual runner into the shop every few months for a checkup. You never know when one of your components will switch alignments. Trap Eater is a level 4 tuner monster with 1900 attack and 1600 defense that can't be normal summoned or set, and must first be special summoned by sending a face-up trap card your opponent controls to the grave, and can't be special summoned by other ways. This card has, for its entire life, bubbled just under the surface of playability, and it's not hard to understand the hype. I don't need to tell you how brutal and annoying floodgates can be, so now you have a monster who removes continuous trap cards as part of a summoning procedure. Sign me up. The problem is that it loses all functionality while your opponent has no continuous traps. You can't normal summon it to get some kind of value, and it's not like you can feed your own continuous traps to it because your opponent has to control it. It doesn't matter that Trap Eater has a great stat line and is a tuner to boot, because even in the sideboard, this card has trouble finding space. Trap Eater can only be summoned on your turn as part of a summon that doesn't start a chain, and by that point a lot of floodgates have already done their damage. Things like Rivalry of Warlords dismantling a field at quick effect speed is devastating, and can be solved much more efficiently with a well-timed Mystical Space Typhoon. I'm sure one day this card will get its due, but until then, I hope it's practiced fasting because it's not seeing a meal for a long time. Vice Berserker is a level 4 monster with 1000 attack and defense, and if this card is sent to the grave as synchro material, the player that synchro summoned using it takes 2000 damage, but that synchro monster gains 2000 attack until the end phase. This is a pretty high risk, high reward card, but sometimes you just need an extra 2k to get over an annoying monster. And hey, if you like DDDs, then I just found your new favorite tech pick. Use this as material while you have Oracle King Dark, and you get all the benefits and heal for 2000 life points, which feels very on brand. Between Dark Worlds, Burning Abyss, and DDDs, Fiends feel like they do the most cost cheating in the game, something I'm sure the accounting department is going berserk over. Wandering King Wildwind is a level 4 monster with 1700 attack and 1300 defense, and if you control a Fiend Tuner monster with 1500 or less attack, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you attempt this, you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn except synchro monsters. And during your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the grave, you can banish this card from your grave to add a Fiend Tuner with 1500 or less attack from your deck to your hand. This pairs very nicely with all the resonators we'll be talking about later on, but you could also splash this into DDDs. Anyway, while its first effect might not mesh well with decks that branch out from synchro summoning, it can get you to one if you have no other plays, and once it's been in the grave for a turn, it can search you a free tuner for your follow-up plays. It really helps give your deck direction, even if Wild Wind isn't very good with those. The GPS signal must be terrible for him. Chaos King Archfiend is a level 7 synchro monster with 2600 attack and defense, requiring a Fiend Tuner and one or more non-tuner monsters as material. And when this card declares an attack, you can switch the current attack and defense of all face-up monsters your opponent controls until the end of the battle phase. An absolutely hilarious way to turn battles on their head, Chaos King is adept at making sure you battle against your opponent's worst stats. And because it swaps their current attack and defense, not their original attack and defense, you don't have to worry about any stat buffs that only affect one of those two that get in the way. And it works even better against Link monsters, because they can never go to defense position, and when you swap their stats, there's always going to be a negative value. Right? Dark Highlander is a level 7 synchro monster with 2800 attack and 2300 defense, requiring a Fiend Tuner and one or more non-tuner Fiend monsters as material. While on the field, neither player can synchro summon, and once per turn, you can target a monster your opponent controls that's equipped with an equipped card, destroy all equipped cards equipped to it, and if you do, inflict 400 points of damage to your opponent for each card destroyed. That's an odd anti-equipped card effect, but hey, sometimes your opponent is running Power of the Guardians and you just have to get rid of that annoying card. Mainly though, this card's big selling point is its floodgate on synchro summoning. Its utility can waver from format to format, but you can't deny that making this first against Sword Soul is going to be a huge pain. Tenyi Spirit Vishuddha notwithstanding. It'd be nice if we got more cards like this, but I guess there can be only one. Part 3? Dragons. Okay, that's all the Fiends. Now we have a smattering of dragons that aren't Archfiends, though some of them are red. Specifically, Red. Dread Dragon is a level 2 fire tuner monster with 1100 attack and 400 defense, and when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the grave, you can add a level 3 or lower dragon monster from your deck to your hand. Not a fan of tuners that have when this card is destroyed effects, and even more so when they have to be destroyed by battle. We're trying to use these monsters to make bigger monsters, not as blockers, so I guess I now know why you'd feel some dread when using this card. Influence Dragon is a level 3 wind tuner monster with 300 attack and 900 defense, and once per turn you can target a face-up monster you control and it becomes dragon type until the end phase. So hey, you can turn non-tuner monsters you have into dragons to help with synchro material requirements. Though, as it turns out, only 3 synchros in the entire game actually need non-tuner dragons, and one can't even use Influence Dragon as a tuner. But it can be used for other extra deck summons or a myriad of sundry effects. So depending on what your opinions of dragons are, this card can be a good influence. Strong Wind Dragon is a level 6 wind monster with 2400 attack and 1100 defense. Ooh, Monarch stats. Though this is one of the King's cards, so I shouldn't expect anything less. It can be destroyed by battle with a monster of the same attack, and if this card is tribute summoned by tributing a dragon monster, it gains attack equal to half the original attack of the tributed monster. And on top of all that, Strong Wind Dragon deals piercing battle damage. Even tributing something as small as 1000 makes Strong Wind 2900, so anything even slightly bigger can get you over even the heartiest of extra deck threats. But my question is, does Strong Wind look like this before or after the attack buff effect? Because if it's before, I'd hate to see it after. Its muscles are already causing a disaster of anatomy. This thing's got muscles on its muscles. Vice Dragon is a level 5 dark monster with 2000 attack and 2400 defense, and if your opponent controls a monster and you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand, but its original attack and defense are halved if so. This makes it very similar to Cyber Dragon, though it lacks a lot of the offensive presence. But if you need your material to be a dark dragon and not a light machine, this'll get the job done, even if it is a half measure. Exploder Dragon Wing is a level 7 Dark Synchro monster with 2400 attack and 1600 defense, requiring a tuner and one or more non-tuner dragon monsters as material. If this card battles at the start of the damage step, you can destroy the monster this card is battling, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the attack the destroyed monster had on the field. But Exploder must have an attack equal to or greater than the attack of what it battled to activate and resolve this effect. It's not a groundbreaking effect, but this does mean you'll deal more damage if you battle something with more than half of Exploder's attack, and can take out monsters that are immune to battle destruction. It's some nice utility, but it's not exactly exploding with value. Part 4. The Rest of the Pit Crew. Okay, that covers all the unaffiliated Fiends and Dragons. Now it's time for all the other unaffiliated cards, starting with Attack Gainer, a level 1 Earth Warrior tuner monster with 0 attack and defense, and if this card is sent to the grave as synchro material, you select a face-up monster your opponent controls, and its attack is lowered by 1000 until the end phase. So it's called Attack Gainer, but it makes monsters lose attack. I guess it's fine, since it still helps you get over your opponent's monsters. Besides, the difference between gaining and losing is all relative, really. Dark Bug is a level 1 Dark Insect monster with 100 attack and defense, and when this card is normal summoned, you can select and special summon a level 3 tuner monster from your grave, but its effects are negated. Now, there are a cavalcade of 1-card extra deck summons, some being game-breaking, some being mediocre, and some being Dark Bug, which is very, very specific. If you have a level 3 tuner and you want to make level 4 synchros, this is a nice option. And to be fair, they just printed a whole archetype of level 3 tuners, and Herald of the Arclight is a level 4 generic synchro. Actually, never mind. I was ready to tear this card a new one, but it's actually got some fun uses, even if it does look like the nightmare version of a Tetris block. Extra Veiler is a level 2 light spellcaster monster with 600 attack and 200 defense, and when your opponent special summons any number of monsters except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, your opponent takes any effect damage you would have taken from their card effects this turn instead. So if your opponent synchro summons using Long Yuan, you now have the perfect counter to reflect that 1200 points of damage right back at your opponent, which is, as we all know, the primary issue when it comes to dealing with Sword Souls. Everyone knows this. Magic Hole Golem is a level 3 Dark Rock monster with 0 attack and 2000 defense, and once per turn you can select a face-up monster you control. Its attack is halved until the end phase, and it can attack directly, but during that turn only the selected monster can attack. So if you absolutely have to get in some direct damage, this card can get it done. And hey, as a rock monster, it's something you can excavate onto the field with Adamancipators. That even summons it in defense position so it doesn't get run over by a Karibo. But outside of getting in for that last bit of damage, I don't know of many other cards that need this help attacking directly to reach their full potential. Or should I say, their whole potential. Power Breaker is a level 4 Earth Warrior monster with 1900 attack and 0 defense, and if this card in your possession is destroyed by your opponent's attack or card effect and sent to the grave, target a face-up spell or trap card your opponent controls and destroy that target. And if this card attacks, it's changed to defense position at the end of the damage step. Goblin attack force type effects are usually pretty annoying, and it's not much better here, but at least this card comes with a little bonus of getting rid of a card on destruction. A very specific card, mind you. It's not exactly breaking a board, but at least it's something. Power Giant is a level 6 Earth Rock monster with 2200 attack and 0 defense, and you can special summon this card by sending a level 4 or lower monster from your hand to the grave. And if you do, decrease this card's level by the level of the monster sent. If this card attacks or is attacked until the end of the damage step, any effect damage you take becomes 0. Boy, you can tell these are anime cards. No duelist is ever so afraid of burn damage than those of the 2D Persuasion. But that's not the important part. That belongs to its ability to special summon itself with some very useful modulation. While most discards will cause some awkward mismatches, a 2 will cause Power Giant to be a 4 and vice versa, if played in a level 3 deck, Power Giant may as well be a level 3 monster. As someone who loved using this in Block Dragon Burning Abyss, I can attest that this card is a giant help. Power Invader is a level 5 Dark Fiend monster with 2200 attack and 0 defense, and if your opponent controls 2 or more monsters, you can normal summon this card without attributing. This makes it slightly bigger than Vice Dragon and Cyber Dragon, and is still a level 5, but without the free special summon, it's a lot less useful. Now, you might be wondering, Nova, you had a whole Fiend section, what is Power Invader doing here? And the answer is A, there's a bunch of power monsters here, so I felt it belonged with the rest of them, and B, it's really funny to me when people point out I didn't cover something when I actually did, so this one's for you. Power Supplier is a level 2 Earth Spellcaster monster with 400 attack and defense, and once per turn you can select a face-up monster you control, and it gains 400 attack while you control this face-up card. But a monster can't gain more than 400 attack from this card's effect. So once per turn you can tie Power Supplier to a new monster to give it the attack buff, but you can't do that multiple times to the same monster. I can see this being a nice companion to a monster that can keep attacks off of Supplier, and over the course of a few turns you could incrementally increase the power of your monsters to do a little extra damage. Unfortunately, incremental increases have never really quite been Yu-Gi-Oh's style, but I'll give him this, it's more of an attack gainer than the monster attack gainer. Seriously, what is up with that? Swordmaster is a level 3 Earth Warrior Tuner monster with 1200 attack and 0 defense, and if a warrior monster you control attacks an opponent's monster, and that opponent's monster is not destroyed by a battle, at the end of the damage step you can special summon this card from your hand. Also, Swordmaster deals piercing battle damage. Now, it's not impossible that you'll be attacking into monsters with 1100 or less defense, but, well, no, let's stick with the good parts. Mainly that this is a tuner for your warrior-centric, combat-focused decks, hitting the field if you battle something with battle destruction immunity, or just has a really big defense stat. Heck, if your warriors can't be destroyed by a battle, you can even attack into big attack position monsters and get away with it with only a little bit of damage. But that's a lot of hoops to go through to be useful, and the payoff is less than stellar. So if it wants to keep the title of Swordmaster, let's just say it's got a lot of competition. Synchro Soldier is a level 1 Earth Machine monster with 0 attack and defense, and once per turn, during your main phase 1, you can select a face-up Synchro monster you control. You remove that face-up Synchro monster you control from play, colloquially known as being banished, to burn your opponent for 600 points of damage. However, if you use this effect during your next standby phase, the banished monster returns to the field. I don't know what we're doing with this card. I mean, some extra burn damage is nice, but 600 is chump change. And while you don't lose the Synchro forever, it's not going to be around during your opponent's turn to protect you, though it might protect the Synchro from interaction. In fact, there are a few specific cases in which this can help your Synchros. The Majestic Dragons will never be around during the end phase, so you'll get to keep them, and cards like Light and Dark and Dragon can use their effects, and then you can just phase them out and they'll come back at full strength. So, okay, it has some uses, but if you want to use it in the long term, you'll have to be ready to protect this monster because it has 0 stats. Some soldier this ended up being. Synchro Magnet is a level 3 Earth Machine Tuner monster with 1000 attack and 600 defense. It can't be normal summoned or set, but when you Synchro summon a Synchro monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. Now, technically this is used by Fake Jack, not Real Jack, which is a mechanical duplicate created by the 3 pure nobles of Iliaster to get the real Jack Atlas arrested. Long story. But since their deck is built to mimic Jack's, we'll let it slide. And hey, if you're looking to Synchro climb, then this gives you the tuner you need to keep going. Honestly, the only marks against this card are that it lacks an easy way to search it, and a bit of extra utility. But since this isn't really an archetypal card, I'm not sure how support for Synchro Magnet works. Top Runner is a level 4 Wind Machine Tuner monster with 1100 attack and 800 defense, and while on the field, all face-up Synchro monsters you control gain 600 attack. This is an odd monster for Jack to have. This looks a lot more at home next to Yusei's monsters like Speed or Rush Warrior. But regardless of how Jack came into it, it's nothing to turn your nose up at. 600 may not be a lot of damage, but it could mean the difference between getting over a monster or not. And being a level 4 tuner with no weird downside is basically a miracle at this point in time. I wouldn't make it a top priority, but it certainly gives a lot of other tuners a run for their money. Trust Guardian is a level 3 Light Fairy Tuner monster with 0 attack and 800 defense, and can't be used as Synchro material, except for the Synchro summon of a level 7 or higher Synchro monster. Once per turn, that Synchro monster that used this as material can't be destroyed by battle, but each time you apply that effect, that Synchro monster loses 400 attack and defense at the end of the damage step. Once again, does not seem like a card Jack would use, but funnily enough, this is actually brought up as a plot point in the anime, which I think is great. In paper, well, there are worse options. Despite the debuff, it's better than just losing the monster, especially because it's one of those applied effects that don't get removed by effect negation, which is pretty sweet. But unless you've got some Light Fairy enablers to field this efficiently, I trust it's not making its way onto your deck list. Twin Shield Defender is a level 4 Earth Warrior monster with 700 attack and 1600 defense, and when this card you control is destroyed by a battle and sent to the grave, you can have the current attack of a face-up monster your opponent controls until the end phase. So even from beyond the grave, this Phalanx fighter is keeping your monsters safe. It can even make a monster too weak to get over the rest of yours, or blunt the damage from a direct attack. Heck, if you're on the offensive, you can smash this into a bigger monster to debuff a big monster enough that your others can get over it. It's a really selfless move, big team player, but why the eyes on the shield? That's very unsettling. Twin Sword Marauder is a level 4 Dark Warrior with 1600 attack and 1000 defense, and once per battle phase, if this card attacks a defense position monster, it can make a second attack in a row, and it deals piercing battle damage. Dang, outside of Purgatrio, this is one of the best ways to clear out scapegoats I've ever seen. While dealing damage. Though, I've gotta say, those are not swords. If anything, they're punching daggers. And I know, Twin Punching Dagger Marauder doesn't really roll off the tongue, but you've gotta have some standards. Celestial Wolflord Blue Sirius is a level 6 Dark Beast Warrior Synchro monster with 2400 attack and 1500 defense, requiring generic material. When this card on the field is destroyed and sent to the grave, you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls and it loses 2400 attack permanently. Damn, at that point the target might as well have no attack. Even a 3000 attack boss monster becomes as offensively threatening as a petite angel. And until then, you've got a monster with a pretty decent attack stat to provide offensive pressure. And this will trigger any time it's destroyed. It can be from you, it can be from your opponent. It can trigger after being synchro summoned, or after it's been revived from the grave. It's not super flashy, but it sure is reaching for the stars. Crimson Blader is a level 8 Fire Warrior Synchro monster with 2800 attack and 2600 defense, requiring generic material. If this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the grave, your opponent can't normal or special summon level 5 or higher monsters during their next turn. It's a deceptively specific effect, and it's true that it's not always relevant, but when it is, it's everywhere. Historically, this was a powerful tool against dragon rulers to keep them from being summoned, and it was best used by dragon rulers. And today, it does a great job of locking down sword souls used primarily by sword souls. So yeah, it turns out that the synchro monster that helps fight synchro summons usually shows up in synchro heavy decks. So while it's not going to make much of an impact against Xyz or Link strategies, against anything that uses rituals, fusions, synchros, and really big monsters, Crimson Blader is on a whole other level. Mind Trust is a normal spell that tributes a level 2 or higher monster to add a tuner monster from your grave to your hand, whose level is less than or equal to half the tributed monster's level. So by tributing a level 2, you can grab a 1, by tributing a 5, you can get a 2 or lower, and tributing an 8 gets you a 4 or lower. Now, if the tuner is worth it, it can be a good trade. But in a vacuum, going 2 for 1 on a tuner is usually a fool's errand, so make sure you mind your card choices. Assault Spirits is a normal trap card that, after activation, becomes an equip card equipped to a monster you control. Once per turn, when the equipped monster attacks, you can send a monster with 1000 attack or less from your hand to the grave during the damage step to have the equipped monster gain the attack of the sent monster until the end phase. Boy, that is a lot of moving parts. It equips to a monster, but you don't get any benefit unless you discard. And God help you if the monster has 1050 attack or more. The card art shows Necrogarden being discarded, and that's a nice hint to show that it's a fun way to vent monsters out of your hand with good grave effects, but not discard effects because it sends, keep that in mind. Honestly though, the weirdest thing is that it's an assault card that's not part of the assault mode theme. I admire its spirit, but not much else. Changing Destiny is a normal trap card that can be activated when an opponent's monster declares an attack. You target the attacking monster, negate the attack, and if you do, change it to defense position, and it can't change its battle position while face up on the field. Then your opponent chooses one of the following. You, the opponent of this card's activator, gains life points equal to half the targeted monster's attack, or your opponent, the activator of this card, takes damage equal to half the target's attack. So it permanently takes that monster out of combat for as long as it's on the field, and your opponent gets the choice of gaining life points or dealing burn damage to you. And unless things are really dire, they're probably gonna pick the latter. But if it means you can save a monster, or prevent enough damage to lose the game, it's more than worth it. Though, it's weird that it also doesn't have the effect to swap out with a Destiny hero card, definitely a flavor fail here. Fiendish Chain is a continuous trap card you can activate by targeting an effect monster on the field. The effects of that face-up monster are negated while on the field, also that face-up monster can't attack. And when that monster is destroyed, destroy this card. Ooh, here's one of those famous 5D's competitive staples. For its time, Fiendish Chain was the premier choice for monster negation. It's not a simple one-time negate, it keeps a monster from being a nuisance for a long time, and keeps it from threatening you in battle. This has fallen off in usage as more ways to use monsters as material have come up, not to mention powerful removal has become more prevalent, but it's still a major part of the game's competitive history, and quite counter to its ability, has had a huge effect on card design. Also, a quick aside here, go follow this link to see a cool 3D model of Fiendish Chain. It's done by Inner Crescent and it looks fantastic, you're gonna love it. Half or Nothing is a normal trap card that you can activate during your opponent's battle phase, except during the damage step, and your opponent chooses one of two effects. Either have the attack of all monsters they currently control until the end of the battle phase, or end the battle phase. So the idea is that you chain this to an attack, flip up Half or Nothing, and now your opponent can choose to either run their smaller monster into yours, or end the battle phase. So unless the attack target is really small, your opponent will choose to skip the battle phase, and your monster will be safe. And if your monster really is that small, then you can at least mitigate some of the damage. It's also cool how the art references the fable of the honest woodcutter from the famous work of literature, Dot Hack. What a profound lesson. King's Consonance is a normal trap card that you can activate in response to an opponent's direct attack. The attack is negated, then you can apply the rest of this card's effect. You banish a tuner and any number of non-tuners from your grave whose levels equal 8 or less, and if you do, special summon from your extra deck a synchro monster whose level equals the total level of the banished monsters, and this summon is treated as a synchro summon. Woof, talk about your reversals of fortune, going from no monsters to a big beefy synchro all with a single activation. And if you synchro summon Black Rose Dragon, then your opponent's gonna be in for a real wild ride. I mean, that's not what you'd expect the Master of Faster to summon, but Jack would want us to forge our own destiny. I think we can all agree on that. King's Synchro is a normal trap card that you can activate when your opponent's monster declares an attack on a synchro monster you control. The attack is negated, then you can apply the rest of this card's effect. Banish that synchro you control and a tuner from your grave, and if you do, special summon from your extra deck a synchro monster whose level equals the total level of the banished monsters, and this is treated as a synchro summon. So where Consonance gets you back into the game if you have an empty board, King's Synchro is here to turn one you already have on board into something much fiercer. And because it's treated as a synchro summon, you don't have to worry about cards that are limited to only being summoned by synchro summon. So your only limit is the material you have on hand. Did you make a level 8 synchro with a level 4 tuner? Then congratulations, you can just summon Red Supernova Dragon. And since many of the best hand traps in the game are themselves tuners, you can easily swerve off the beaten path to summon all kinds of wacky payoffs. But like with Consonance, the main weakness is that your opponent has to be the one to trigger this. There's very little ways to force this without being vulnerable to this whole play sequence getting cut by an MST. It's a fun counter card, just make sure you have a backup plan so you don't drop this game, King. Lineage of Destruction is a normal trap card that you can activate during a turn you destroyed a defense position monster your opponent controls. You select a level 8 monster you control, and during this turn, the selected monster can attack twice. Now, if you triggered this effect by using a level 8 monster to destroy a defense position one, you're only going to get one additional attack, but the trigger doesn't say the monster that destroyed the defense position monster has to be the target, so there's that. And nothing says those attacks can't be direct attacks, which isn't always a given. However, this is another example of having a lot of hoops to jump through for what amounts to a mediocre effect. Besides, bullying DM-era normal monsters is so uncool. Seriously, they're just vibing and all of a sudden this big monster comes around and starts smashing them up. No wonder Yugi boomers think synchros ruin the game when they're pulling stuff like this. Nightmare Archfiends is a normal trap card that has you tributing a monster to special summon 3 Nightmare Archfiend tokens to your opponent's side of the field in attack position, which are level 6 Dark Fiend type monsters with 2000 attack and defense, and each time one is destroyed, its controller takes 800 points of damage. On the surface, this feels like a worse Ojama trio. Sure, the burn is more, but for that you're tributing a monster to give your opponent 3 substantially sized tokens that they can use however they want, which is why you shouldn't use this without a plan. Like Trio, this can gum up a board if for some reason your opponent can't use Dark Fiend and normal monsters who are level 6 as material for anything. It also helps manipulate the amount of monsters on each side of the field, which makes this technically an out to Mystic Mine. But the most prevalent is probably when you have a board wipe ready and want to punish your opponent just a bit more. For instance, if you're about to Dark Hole and you'll lose your monster anyway, why not give your opponent a few extra tokens to beam them over the head for 2400 damage? Heck, if Dark Hole is too specific for you, Topological Bomber Dragon can do something similar, and it lives in your extra. Though the funniest thing might be using this in a Layer of Darkness deck, essentially kaijuing one of your opponent's monsters into 3, and then using them as super polymerization fodder for Predaplant Trifio Veritum. So yeah, this seemingly abysmal card actually has a lot of profound, if not incredibly specific, usages. So if your opponent has the stones to play this card, you know you're in for a nightmare of a game. Powerful Rebirth is a continuous trap card that you activate by targeting a level 4 or lower monster in your grave. You special summon that target and increase its level by 1 and attack and defense by 100. And when this monster is destroyed, destroy this card. Though, notably, it doesn't have the reverse effect like a lot of these cards usually have. If you MST Powerful Rebirth after the summon is successful, it doesn't out the summoned monster. However, it does remove the level and stat buff because it's not in the same effect as the summoning. Now, the range range of cards you can summon with this is pretty narrow, but its level modulation means it can be used for more lines of play than it would be otherwise. And that's the most interesting part about it, because an extra 100 in both stats is not exactly putting it in a new power bracket. But hey, I'm also happy to see Dark King of the Abyss getting back up after being knocked down so many times. They're a real icon of perseverance. Prideful Roar is a normal trap card that you can activate during damage calculation if your monster battles an opponent's monster with a higher attack. You pay life points equal to the difference in attack, and your monster gains attack equal to the difference, plus an extra 300 to get them over the top during damage calculation only. So, like in the card art, if your Breakdance the Musical Warrior battles Morbius the Frost Monarch, assuming they've used their Spellian counter, you'll need to pay 800 life points to make up the difference between 1600 and 2400. And then Breakdance will be at 2700, so you'll emerge triumphant with a little bit of extra damage on the side. Pride may cometh before the fall, but it's your opponent who's going to be taking a tumble. Revival Gift is a normal trap card that selects a tuner monster in your grave and special summons it. Its effects are negated, and you can special summon 2 Gift Fiend tokens to your opponent's side of the field, which are level 3 Dark Fiend monsters with 1500 attack and defense. Like with Nightmare Archfiends, if you have a game plan, this can be outright devastating. For instance, if you revive a level 3 tuner and give your opponent 2 level 3 tokens, activating an Owner's Seal gives you those tokens back, at which point you can make Trishula. And if your tuner has an effect when used as synchro material, that'll still trigger because it only negates their on-field effects. But the real gift is getting to see these weird little goo gremlins. They're so delightful. When are we getting their archetype? Space Gate is a continuous trap card, and each time a monster your opponent controls attacks or is attacked, you place a gate counter on this card at the end of the damage step. During your main phase, you can send this card to the grave to special summon a monster from your hand whose level is less than or equal to the number of gate counters on this card. Now, this isn't entirely up to your opponent to activate, as you can attack into your opponent's monster to gain counters, but if their field is empty, then you'll have no luck with it. Though if you're getting to attack directly, that's not too bad either. This will work best in decks with low-level monsters, so it doesn't have to stay on the field for very long, but does have the capability of summoning some really big ones if left to its own devices. Just make sure you have some extra spacesuits lying around. Not everything in this game is suited to dealing with the cold void of space. I'd hate to see someone put so much work into pulling all this off, only to see Dawn Zalug perish in the stellar expanse. Synchro Deflector is a normal trap card that you can only activate when a face-up synchro monster you control is selected as an attack target. You negate the attack and destroy a monster your opponent controls. Wow, what a very specific and undertuned Mirror Force this is. There's not really much to say about it, aside from how power crept this thing has gotten over the years, and that I'm sad the card art is stuck at this moment in time, because I'd love to see what happens approximately 6 frames in the future when Soggy gets hit by the big kaboom. I'm not a big clown hater, but this Harlequin is just too much. Tuner Capture is a normal trap card that can only be activated when your opponent synchro summons a monster, and it special summons a tuner used for its synchro summon from their grave to your field. So if they have a really cool tuner you want to use for your plays, this is the way to get it. Though, since your opponent is usually going to be synchro summoning on their own turn, nabbing anything during main phase 1 is a surefire way to get it run over, though that's not much of a problem if you wanted it to be a blocker. And if it's one of those tuners that can synchro summon at quick effect speed, a la Formula Synchron, then you just struck gold. But your odds of making this work for you are about the same as getting a good pull in one of these crane games. Heck, even when you pull good, it kinda sucks. Like, we got Iron Chain Coil when we could have gotten Black Salvo. This game is rigged. And that's all the generic cards in Jack Atlas's roster. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, because next week we're covering Resonators and the big beautiful boys themselves, the Red Dragon Archfiends. Until then, I'd like to give a big thank you to everyone who keeps this channel going, my lovely and generous patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander, Ashlyn Waltz, Nebula Navigators, 3rd Dynasty, Ava Gule, Adams Agidel, Benjamin Meisner, Biohazard 011, Cryptic Gamer, Eric, Frankie, Genesis Yugioh, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Howling Zangetsu, Inblink, Ironic, John Manji, Julius Sneezer, Larakia, Mighty Action X, Meteornus, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Ruxith Sarani, Shooting Star 3300, The Fresh Prince of Con Air, The Wizard Moose, Tyler Cranston and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders, Bear Sharktopus Studios, Jazz Ghost, Corbinisms, Cozy Boat 275, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Jesus Garcia, Manga Pages, Marion James E. Picata, Nitromo, RGS, Rem T. Bright, Star-Lord 777, and the Legendary Raven, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. I'm only able to continue doing this thanks to the support of these lovely people, so if you'd like to be a part of these credits, as well as help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, please check out my YouTube membership or Patreon links in the description to see if I have anything you'd like on offer. And if you'd like to hear me talk about another of 5D's biggest names, check out this gigantic video I made covering Yusei Fudo. And if you want to see two Yugi tubers going at it, check out Noah Jenkinai's latest series progression polls, where your voice shapes the format. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.